mystic motivation. Welcome to my witchy channel for witchy women. My name is Zoe. I'm a lunar glamour witch. And today I just wanted to talk about some books that I've been reading lately that I feel like other witches would enjoy, other spiritualists would enjoy. We're going to talk about some books that are kind of more focusing on that, on spirituality, and then also talk about some books that you could just read for pleasure, just for enjoyment. So I just recently got back into reading. I used to be a bookworm. I only really read like self-help books, self-development books, but I opened up the door to reading fiction recently, and I've been just falling in love with reading all over again through fiction. So that will be our pleasure books we'll talk about in a second here, but I thought to start this series that I'll do every once in a while talking about books I've been reading, I would start with some beginner books that I've read that I feel like are simple, but they left an impact. We'll briefly talk about each book, why I recommend them, and maybe you can add them to your TBR, is that what it's called? Category if you're on Goodreads or if you're on Fable. I use Fable. And maybe you'll want to add some of these books to your radar. So the first book I would recommend, a book that stands out to me and feels like it set a foundation for me in my spiritual witchcraft journey, was The 4 Agreements. This book is, again, it's seemingly simple, but this book goes into these 4 different agreements that you can make to yourself and kind of live by or check in with yourself on as a means to live a life of more freedom, more love. So the 4 agreements are: number 1, be impeccable with your word. The 2nd agreement, don't take anything personally. The 3rd agreement, don't make assumptions. And the 4th agreement, always do your best. So it sounds really simple, but I just love the way that this author went into these agreements. I'm sure you've heard of this book before, it's a popular one, but the way that these simple agreements lay a foundation for the way that you want to live a life that's more peaceful, that's more from a place of love, more from a place of understanding, of releasing what doesn't belong to you and focusing on what actually matters. This definitely left a good imprint in my journey, and I think it's a book that everybody could benefit from reading if they're looking for a good grounding foundation for their practice. Laying into that is The Secret, another popular book. But again, this book really gave me a great foundation of understanding the law of attraction. I think in general, this book does give a good symbolic, representation of how you can really choose the perspective you want to have that leads to the life that you desire. When you first open the book, there is a reference from the Emerald Tablet, circa 3000 BC, the popular phrase, as above, so below, as within, so without. And that's something I've always really lived by within my practice, kind of like the balancing scales, the scales of justice, just understanding the nuance to everything. And so this book, I feel like, covers kind of like the one side of that. It touches upon both the as above, so below within each of us and within this universe, but it really focuses on that aspect that we do always have a choice with kind of our circumstances, our thinking. And this book becomes kind of this foundation of how can I reclaim control of my reality, of my intention, of my perspective. So I definitely recommend for a foundational read for the witches. Now, this is the book I was most excited to talk about next, Rise, Sister, Rise. This is by Rebecca Campbell. This book really set me down the path of embracing witchcraft, of embracing my call and my desire to work with other witchy women, to create a coven, to embrace that natural desire I had for the matriarchy within myself, this natural desire to reclaim the goddess, to reclaim creativity. This book just really encapsulates what it is to be a woman reclaiming their spiritual sovereignty. One of the most popular phrases from the book is written on the back. It says, "Rise for you, rise for me. When you rise first, you rise for she." And I feel like that really encapsulates what this book is all about. It's not only a book that talks about, Rebecca Campbell's own reclamation of her power, of her path, but women as a whole. And these thought pieces that are included in this book, you'll find yourself relating to them. You'll find yourself having an awakening through them, a realization of these are, pieces of the puzzle within my own journey that I needed to connect together to reclaim that for myself. This book will really help you just deepen your path, deepen your journey, in your witchcraft journey, in your spirituality as a woman. And I would recommend this book too. any witchy woman. This is my #1 pick for today's video. Next, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Again, this book is pretty seemingly simple. It really, I think, just gives a great foundation of how to embrace a meditative state. It really, talks about Eckhart Tolle's own experience from going from a very unconscious person, a person who was constantly in a state of suffering, into a very present, a very joyous, a very blissful individual just by shifting into the present moment. And so I think this book is great to read if you are looking for a more grounded state in your practice, if you're looking to incorporate meditation into your life as a way to ground. The simple thought pieces in this book you can find relation to and see how, again, these simple shifts in perspective can help you find your way there. This is a book that I end up thinking about a lot in subtle moments where I know that I need to be present again. And so I think it's just a good read to have to remind yourself of the power we have to put ourselves back into a grounded space. Kind of going hand in hand with that, Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza is similar in The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, but in a more science-based view. So obviously, Dr. Joe Dispenza is rather spiritual for a scientist, right? And the work he does working with, meditations and scanning brain waves to see that the different brainwave states that people enter into when they're doing meditative practices and how that's actually changing their bodies, changing their chemistry, changing their lives, and saving people. So it's kind of like this book, but with a more scientific view. He really goes into in this book, Becoming Dr. Joe, Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, the ins and outs, the science behind meditation. And so if you are somebody that wants a little bit more logic to the mystical, I think this book is a perfect way to enter into that to kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes of a meditation, a guided meditation, a sound healing, what's happening to you when you prioritize meditation in your day-to-day life. This book I really like just because he does talk about testimonies of people who have done his workshops, who have done his meditations, and really amazing research and work has come out of what research Dr. Joe Dispenza has done. It's just fascinating to kind of enter the world of seeing spirituality and the science coming together rather than being separated. And so I definitely recommend it. It's not at all a boring read. He writes it in a way that's very entertaining, again, referring to testimonies and referring to his own mystical experiences. That makes it a book that you want to read. My final foundational spiritual book recommendation would be The Empath's Survival Guide. This book actually just happened upon me. I didn't even go seeking it out. There was a job I was working at. It was a couple years ago, probably 2021. And this book was just sitting in the back and no one claimed it. So I was like, dibs. And I think this is just a good read to have, again, foundationally, a book that you could go back to where you can understand your energy as an empath, as an individual who's sensitive to energy and is deeply intuitive, because that's what this book covers. It covers how to, reclaim your power as a sensitive, empathic individual, as somebody that's deeply intuitive. You are also susceptible to energy vampires, to being drained because you're always naturally inclined to be on within your sensitivities, if that makes sense. So I think this is a great book to go to when you want to ground yourself. Again, all of these book recommendations for spiritual reads, I think that kind of is the gist of all of them. They're just great foundational reads to have that can remind you to reclaim your power. Each one of these kind of have the same type of vibe to them, as in the 4 agreements. Remind yourself what kind of life you actually want to live. What kind of agreements do you want to make with yourself to live a life that's fulfilling to you, joyous and full of love for you. The Secret, reminding you of the power you have to alchemize your reality. It gives a good understanding of the law of attraction. Rise, Sister, Rise, inspiring you to walk down this path to explore the magical, to reclaim your power. The Power of Now, giving you a guide to how to be present in simplicity, how to reclaim your power in the present moment and find joy in just what is. Becoming Supernatural, giving you a more scientific view of how meditation can change your life. And then The Empath Survival Guide, letting you understand yourself as a more sensitive, empathic human being and how you can work with that, again, as a superpower rather than something that drains you. So those are my recommendations, foundational books that I would recommend to any witch that is on a journey of self-development, on a journey of understanding your power, reclaiming your power. I think these are good foundational books to thumb through. Now to the fun part, switching into some fictional reads. I am just now getting into fiction reading, so I want to talk about A Court of Thorns and Roses. I read this series in a month. I picked up the first book and I couldn't put it down. I think if you are wanting to enter a world of creativity, if you're wanting to tap into your creativity, fiction is a great way to reclaim your power in that. So there's spiritualness in reading fantasy, right? There's spirituality. There's a reclamation of spirituality in reading fiction. I truly believe from my experience of just starting to get into it that it's really helped me turn on more creative thinking in my own life by reading these fantasy worlds. So these books are about the main character. Her name is Feyre. She is pretty much in just a shitty situation, a sticky situation, and she ends up killing a wolf when she was on a hunt to feed her family who is in poverty, and that leads to her being dragged into the world of magical fae. So I'll leave it as simple as that. But I think this is just such a great read. It has everything you would want, from world building to including magical lore around fae. As a glamour witch, there is a lot of references to glamour magic in these books, which I like. There's romance, there's action, there's war, there's beautiful friendships that evolve along the journey. I loved reading these. I read them all in a month, which is fast for me as somebody that's not a particularly fast reader. There's 2 more books coming out soon, so I guess I picked this up at the perfect time. The next book is coming out October, and then the following book is coming out in January. So there's 2 more books to this series coming through, but I'm excited to be reading fiction. I want to keep doing this as I'm getting more into reading. I do like to read self-help spiritual books, but now I'm going to start incorporating fiction. So when I do these videos, I'll talk about what I'm reading in the self-development world, what it can help you with, and then end it with some fun fantasy if you're into that. What I'm reading, what you might want to read. If you've read any of these books, if you've read A Court of Thorns and Roses, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you're reading, what's good. What book would you recommend? And in the next video I do for this, I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but I'll talk about more like specifically witchy books that I recommend. I just wanted with this first video to talk about like kind of general self-help spiritual books that I feel like are kind of easy reads, foundational reads that like, they're just good to have on your bookshelf. And of course, with A Court of Thorns and Roses being my first fiction series, it's all I know at this point. I'm biased when I say it's really good, but this is definitely a series I would recommend to anyone who wants to get into fiction, already reads fiction and hasn't read this yet. It's just fun, it's magical. And it's a page turner. You don't get bored. It's just really interesting. Be sure to follow along on my channel. I post all things witchy content, from my life to educational things around witchcraft. And this is just a safe space for witchy women to come together and to connect. Be sure to hit that bell button so you stay up to date on future videos. And if you want to check out more of my work, I do have an online coven, the Scarlet Rose Coven. If you want to learn more about what we do in my virtual coven, go to the link in bio, click the Covens tab, and you'll find out what our next coven theme is, as well as what you gain as a Scarlet Rose member. Much love, witches, and I'll see you back here soon. Happy reading.